This is Julie Shea here with another episode of Advancing Allieds. Over the past year, we've been working on a series of publishing for allied professionals. Recently, we learned about an exciting new initiative with the launch of an AP publication submission fund for allied professionals. And as part of this initiative, we're interviewing allied professionals from the Heart Rhythm Society with publishing experience to talk a little bit about how publishing has impacted their career and moved the field forward with their research. With me here today, I have Dr. Heather Ross, who is a nurse practitioner at Honor Health Cardiac Arrhythmia Group in Scottsdale, Arizona. Heather is also a clinical associate professor at Arizona State University. So welcome, Heather.
Yes, thank you for having me, Julie.
So Heather, tell us a little bit about the research you published and why you wanted to be published. Why do you think it's important?
Sure. I do a lot of research around areas related to policy, areas related to health equity. And in all of that research, it's so important that we disseminate, right? I tell this to my students, we talk about it amongst ourselves in the allied professional community, whether we're talking about clinical work or some of the bigger social science work or the policy work. It's so important to disseminate our knowledge in order to continue growing our profession and in order to continue building that basis of evidence so we can take the best care of our patients. To that end, we always want to get our work out so that the most eyeballs can see it. And one of the ways that we can do that is by publishing in journals so that when you go online and search to see what is the evidence out there, you can find it because it's published. If you don't publish, it's not findable and we can't apply it for our patients. And along those lines, we always then want to publish in places that people go to read, like the Heart Rhythm Journal. Now, when we think about publishing in journals, so many of our journals are in one of two ways that they exist. Either they are traditionally modeled and supported by a lot of advertising funds, which is an important source of funding for disseminating work. But it also means that you have to be a member, which I do recommend, always being a member of Heart Rhythm Society, but you also have to maybe be a member of an organization or have a university affiliation so you can get through all of those firewalls by having library access to journals. So that is a barrier to people seeing our work. The other way that we then can publish through open access, which allows no firewalls that our work has to sit behind, that costs money. And the way that journals pay for their publication costs then is by charging open access fees to authors. And as you mentioned, allied professionals often don't have a huge, robust fund from their institution to support publication fees. I've run into that myself, and I often have to make some very tough choices about where to submit my work, what journals to submit my work to, and whether I can afford to publish my work with a gold open access, platform, so that everybody around the world has the opportunity to see it. And, you don't like to think that way, but there's a trade-off between money and access.
Yeah, that's really the reality of the situation. If you work at an academic medical institution, oftentimes, there are slush funds for such things. But, if you're in private practice, sometimes that doesn't exist for allied professionals. So I think this is a great initiative in terms of providing a resource to allieds that want to get their work out there, that it's important. And I think that's the big thing that you hit upon is the importance of getting the work out there. You've done it already, right? So just you need to kind of bring it home. And
yeah, right. It's like what we both learned this in nursing school, right? If you didn't document it, you didn't do it. And I think the same way about our research. If you don't document it, you don't write it down, and you don't share it, you haven't completed that job of doing research.
Exactly. So can you tell us a little bit about how publishing has impacted your career?
Well, as you mentioned, I'm an academic. I'm a professor at a big university. And part of the way that, part of the expectation for us to hold on to our jobs year after year is by that scholarly output, that publishing. So it's been a significant part of my career, A, because it has to, but B, because putting my ideas out into the public sphere has invited other scholars from around the world to message me, or call me up and say, hey, what do you think about these ideas? And it's an opportunity to impact work sort of with that ripple effect far beyond, right? And it also then, by publishing and people say, oh, this individual, knows some stuff out in the world, get opportunities to speak in other places, get opportunities to review grant proposals and review abstract submissions and things like that. It's a lot of that sort of virtuous cycle of contributing to the field so that you can further contribute to the field and further other people contributing to the field.
Right. It's really a springboard effect that just, once you kind of get it released, and it has a ripple effect for other opportunities as well. So what impact do you think allied professional research has on the EP profession?
I'm glad that you asked that. Allied professional research, yes, there are very specific lenses that allied professionals use when we see the world through our disciplinary eyes, it takes so many different sets of eyes to really do that optimal job of caring for our patients, which at the end of the day is why we all go to work in the morning or in the evening, depending on what shift you're working, right? But whether we're coming from the bedside or the EP lab or a bench science environment, it's all to patient care. And having the allied professional lens, it gives us that full prism. A single discipline can't do the whole thing on its own. And there are really wonderful perspectives that our physician colleagues bring to the table. And then there are other really wonderful perspectives that our pharmacy professional colleagues bring to the table and our social work colleagues. And we need all of those together in order to do the job, because it doesn't stop at the moment that the lesion is completed in the left atrium or at the moment when that device incision is closed, right? It's the whole experience that our patient carries with them as they live their lives out away from the hospital. And so we need all of those inputs in order to be able to do that well.
Yeah, I think, again, to your point about, allied professionals are in kind of a unique position when they're directly interacting with patients on a day-to-day basis to identify certain situations where we may not have knowledge. Like, for example, I had a patient whose device was repeatedly beeping, making a magnet tone. And it turned out, after some investigative work one day in clinic, I found out he had a vaping device in his pocket.
Okay.
And so I wrote this up and submitted it to Heart Rhythm Case Reports, and it got published. It actually went out for a press release, so it got picked up by UPI. So again, talking to your dissemination of this information, this is important information for people to be aware of, right? So allied professionals have important information. They have important things to say and important things to bring, and publication is the way to do that.
Absolutely. I'm so glad that you mentioned case reports. I myself am have a review of a case report I need to, or a reviewed case report I need to finish up and get resubmitted. That's a big part of the experience. It's not just that systematic research that is designed to build generalizable knowledge. That's important, don't get me wrong, but also learning from other people's lived experience through case reports, I think is so valuable. And I think it's underutilized. And particularly as we sit here in the waning days of 2022, realizing that, we go to conferences and have these in-person interactions less often. I'll tell you, some of my research, my PhD research, had to do with in-person interactions at conferences. And I found that person-to-person sort of casual conversation was one of the most important ways that knowledge about heart rhythm care gets translated. As we have less of that and fewer of those face-to-face opportunities, the imperative to share that learned lived experience through case reports is, I would say, as important, if not more important, than sharing the big trial data.
Yeah, for sure. I completely agree. So just to kind of finish up here, talking a little bit about this new allied professional funding campaign, how can this campaign help the allied professional community? We've talked a little bit about this, going forward in terms of, donating to the fund, accessing the fund. Obviously, Carrie provided some information about the specifics of that, but can you expound a little bit on your perspective?
Yeah, from my perspective, every barrier that we can remove from allied professionals feeling like, oh, I don't have a research fund, from my institution, or, oh, I work in private practice and publishing is not a thing that we do. Listen, it's everybody's job. It's part of our responsibility as professionals to pay it forward. And I think that every time we can make publishing more accessible to allied professionals, we as a whole heart rhythm community are doing a better job for our patient mission.
So Heather, thank you so much for sharing your impressive publishing knowledge and experience with us. We're really excited about the new AP Publication Submission Fund and hope that this will open doors for more allied professionals to get their research and experiences disseminated. So thank you again for joining me today. This is Julie Shea with Heart Rhythm TV. Please check us out on our YouTube channel and subscribe.